what jobs are going to be made redundant in a world where I am sat here as a CEO with 1,000 AI agents.
Right.
I was thinking of all the names of the people in my company who are currently doing those jobs. I was thinking about my CFO when you talked about processing business data, my graphic designers, my video editors, etc. So what jobs are going to be impacted?
Yeah, all of those. So I think...
And what do they do?
Maybe this is useful for the audience. I think if your job is as routine as it comes, your job is gone in the next couple of years. So meaning if in those jobs, for example, quality assurance jobs, data entry jobs, you're sitting in front of a computer and you're supposed to click and type things in a certain order. Operator and those technologies are coming on the market really quickly, and those are going to displace a lot of labor.
Accountants,
lawyers.
Yes. I mean, I've just pulled a ligament in my foot, and they did an MRI scan, and I had to wait a couple of days for someone to look at the MRI scan and tell me what it meant.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's gone.
Yeah, I think the healthcare ecosystem is hard to predict because of regulation. And again, there's so many limiting factors on how this technology can permeate the economy because of regulations and people's willingness to take it. But things, unregulated jobs that are purely text in, text out. If your job, you get a message and you produce some kind of artifact that's like probably text or images, that job is at risk.
So just to give you some stats here as well. About 50% of Americans who have a college degree currently use AI. Mm-hmm. The stats are significantly lower for Americans without a college degree. So you can see how a splinter might emerge there, and that crack will widen because people like us at this table are all messing around with it. But my mum and dad in Plymouth in the southwest, rural England, haven't got, they just figured out iPhones. So I got them an iPhone, and now they're texting me back. AI is a million miles away. And if I start running off with my AGI and my agents, that gap is going to widen. Women are disproportionately affected by automation, which is what you were talking about there, with about 80% of working women in an at-risk job compared to just over 50% of men, according to the Harvard Business Review. And jobs requiring only a high school diploma have an automation risk of 80%, while those requiring a bachelor's degree have an automation risk of just 20%. So we can see again how this will cause a sort of a...
It's also a huge risk with business process outsourcing, which is essentially Western countries sending jobs to India, to the Philippines. Like at the moment, millions of people have been lifted out of poverty through the ability to do those kind of business process outsourcing jobs, and those are all going to go.
But they're going to have 1,000 employees.
But also, these people are actually already transitioning to training AIs. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be a massive industry around training AIs
until they're trained.
Well, no, you have to continuously acquire new skills, and this is what I'm talking about. I mean, this is, again, if AI is a function of its data, then you need increasingly more data. And by the way, we ran out of internet data.
I was actually thinking, interestingly, that this might not be great for the United States or the UK, the Western world, because it is going to be a leveler. Where now a kid in India doesn't need a Silicon Valley office and $7 million in investment to throw up a software company, basically.
My belief is that, so I have a more broad definition of AGI and the singularity. And for me, AGI is, do we have artificial general intelligence in terms of, generally speaking, can AI just do stuff that humans used to be able to do? And we've already crossed that point. We have this general intelligence that we can now all access. And 800 million people a week are now using ChatGPT. It's exploded in the last 3 months. And then to me, a singularity, when the first tractor went out onto a farm, for me that was a singularity moment because everyone who worked in farming, it used to take 100 people to plow a field, and now a tractor comes along and 2 guys with the tractor can now plow the field in just as much time, and now 98 people out of 100 are completely out of a job.
We also always underestimate a technology if it does go on to change history. When you look back through cars, horses, planes, the Wright brothers just thought of a plane as being something that the army could use. They had no idea of the application. So someone said to me recently, they said, when it does change the world, we underestimate the impact that it will change the world. And I see people now with their estimations of AI and AI agents already incredibly optimistic. And so if history holds here, we are undershooting the impact it's going to have. And I think this is the first time in my life where the Industrial Revolution analogies seem to fall a little bit short.
Yeah.
Because we've never seen intelligent. That's like I could think of this as I'm not an intelligent person on this, but I could see that as like the disruption of muscles. Whereas this is the disruption of intelligence.
That's exactly the thing, is that what makes human beings special is our cognitive capacity, and very specifically our ability to plug our minds into each other so that the sum is or the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. That's what makes human cognition special. And what we are doing is we are creating something that can technologically surpass it without any of the preconditions that make that a safe process. So yes, we've revolutionized the world how many different times? It's innumerable. But we've made farming vastly more efficient. That's different than taking our core competency as a species and surpassing ourselves with the product of our labor. I think your question is a good one. Then what does become?
We only have one thing left. We have our muscles, which we got rid of in the Industrial Revolution. And then we have our intellect, which is this digital revolution. Now we're left with emotions and agency. So we essentially, the agency idea, I think we used to judge people on IQ, and now IQ is the big leveler. And now going forward for the next 10 years, we're going to look at, are you a high agency person or a low agency person? Do you have the ability to get things done and coordinate agents? Do you have the ability to start businesses or give orders to digital armies? And essentially these high agency people are going to thrive in this new world because they have this other thing that's been bubbling under the surface, which is
really interesting. When you said agency is going to remain as an important thing, we're sat here talking about AI agents. And the crazy thing in a world of AI agents that have super intelligence is I can just tell my agent, listen, I'm going on holiday. Please build me a SaaS company that spots a market opportunity, throw up the website, post it on my social media channel. I'll be in Hawaii. And this new agentic world is stealing that too, because now it can take action. In the same way that I can browse the internet, I can call Domino's Pizza, speak to their agentic agent, organize my pizza to be there before I even wake up. And in fact, predictability, OpenAI now learns, and Sam Altman said that they've expanded the memory feature. So it knows it's knowing more and more and more and more about me. It'll almost be able to predict what I want when I want it. It'll know Steve's calendar, he's arriving at the studio, make sure his cadence is on the side, make sure his iPad has the brief on it, do the brief, do the research for me, and everything else. So it'll remember Bret's birthday, so when I arrive, there'll be something. In fact, it's removing my need for any agency.
Yes, and again, I don't know how to make this point so that it occurs to people what I'm really suggesting, but today, maybe it's not conscious, but, well, let me put it to you this way. If you're conscious, you started out as a child that wasn't. And although this may not fully encapsulate it, you are effectively an LLM, right? You go from an unconscious infant to a highly conscious adult. And the process by which you do that has a lot to do with being trained effectively on words and other things in an environment in exactly the way that we now train these AIs. So the idea that we can take consciousness off the table, it won't be there till we figure out how to program it in and we're safe because we don't know how consciousness works. I take the opposite lesson. We've created the exact thing that will produce that phenomenon, and then we can have philosophers debate whether it's real consciousness or it just behaves exactly as if it were, and the answer is those aren't different.
Doesn't matter.
And the same thing is true for agency, especially if you've created an environment in which these AIs are de facto competitors. What you're effectively doing is creating an evolutionary environment in which they will evolve to fill whatever niches are there, and we didn't spell out the niches. So I have the sense we have created something that truly is going to function like a new kind of life. And it's especially troubling because it speaks our language. So that leads us to believe it's more like us than it is. And it's actually potentially quite different. So,
but by the way, he's the optimist here. Right? He's so optimistic about LLMs and how they're gonna evolve. Yes, it's amazing. It's amazing technology. I think it raised global IQ, right? 800 million people. 800 million people are that much more intelligent and emotionally intelligent as well. I know people who previously were very coarse and they kind of rob people the wrong way. They would say things in not so polite way. And then suddenly they started putting what they're saying through ChatGPT in order to kind of make it kinder and nicer, and they're more liked now. And so not only is it making us more intelligent, but also it allows us to be the best version of ourselves. And the scenario that you're talking about, I don't know what's wrong with that. Like, I would want less agency in certain places. Mm-hmm. Like, I would want something to help me not, open up a peanut butter jar at night. Right? There are places in my life where I need more control, and I would rather cede it to some kind of entity that could help me make better choices.
I mean, unfortunately, even if there is some small group of elites that are able to go to Hawaii while something else does the mundane details of their business building, we are rather soon going to be faced with a world that has billions of people who do not have the skills to leverage AI. Some of them will be necessary for a time. You're going to need plumbers, but this is also not a long-term solution, because not only are there not enough of those jobs, but of course we have humanoid robots that, once imbued with AI capacity, will also be able to take, they'll be able to crawl under your house into the crawl space and fix your plumbing. So what typically happens when you have a massive economic contraction that arises from the fact that a huge number of people are out of work is that the elites start looking at those people and thinking, well, we don't really need them anyway. And so the idea that this AI disruption doesn't lead us to some very human catastrophe, I think, is overly optimistic, and that we need to start preparing right now. What are the rights of a person who has had whatever it is that they've invested in completely erased from the list of needs? Is that person responsible for not having anticipated AI coming? And is it their problem that they are now starving and they're being eyed by others as, a useless eater? I don't think so.
How is it different than when the what's it called, the looming machine came and the textile workers, the result of in the Luddite sort of revolution? How is it different than any time in history when technology automated a lot of people out of jobs?
I would say scale and speed. That's how it's different. And the scale and speed is going to result in an unprecedented catastrophe, because the rate at which people are going to be simultaneously sidelined, not just in one industry, but across every industry, is just simply
and it also
new.
did actually happen. There was an for the first 50 years of industrialization, from like late 1700s to early 1800s, the Charles Dickens novels are essentially people coming from the farms who were displaced, arriving in cities, kids living on the streets. The British decided to pick everyone up and send them over to Australia, which is where I came from. There was this massive issue of displacement. I think we're going to go into a high velocity economy where, rather than this long arc of career that lasts 45 years, we're going to have these very fast careers that last 10 months to 36 months. And you invent something, you take it to market, you put together a team of 5 to 10 people who work together. You then get disrupted.
Can I mention a story here? There's an entrepreneur that used Replit in a similar way. His name is Billy Howell. You can find him on YouTube, on the internet. He would go to Upwork, and he would find what people are asking for, different requests for certain apps, technologies. Then he would take what they're asking for, put it into Replit, make it an application, call them, tell them, I already have your application. Would you pay $10,000 for it? And so that's sort of an arbitrage opportunity that's there right now.
That's not arbitrage. That's theft.
What is it? How is it theft?
You have somebody who has an idea that can be brought to market, and somebody else is cryptically detecting it and then selling back their own idea to them.
Well, they're paying them to do that. They're saying, I will give you $500 if someone makes this for me.
Right, but this is what I more or less think is going to happen across the whole economy, is that, yes, from this perspective, we can see that everybody is suddenly empowered to build a great business. Well, what do we think about the folks who are going to be displaced from the top? What are they going to think about all these people building all of these highly competitive businesses? And are they going to find a way to do, what venture capital has done or what record producers have done? What they're going to do is they're going to take their superior position at the top, and they are going to take most of the wealth that is produced by all of these people who have these ideas that in a proper market would actually create businesses for them, and they're going to parasitize them.
I think that with this introduction of AI and AI agents, old value has moved. And now it's not going to be the case that the idea itself is the moat. And it's not going to be the case that resources are the moat. So in such a scenario, you still have to figure out distribution. You still have to have, for example, like an audience. So if you're a podcaster now, you have 1 million followers on Twitter, you're in a prime position because you now have something that the great guy with a great idea with no audience has. You have inbuilt distribution. So I now think actually much of the game might be moving to still about taste and idea, but also the moat is distribution.
Yeah, and speaking of adaptive systems, one of the adaptation that will happen is people will seek humans and will seek proof of humanity.
Oh, I agree that authenticity is going to become the coin of the realm, and anything that can be faked or cheated is going to be devalued, and things, spontaneous jazz or comedy that is interactive enough that it couldn't possibly have been generated with the aid of AI. Those things are going to become prioritized. Spontaneous oratory rather
That's
than
great.
speeches.
Oh, that answers some of your questions.
That
No, it answers my question for the tiny number of people who are in a position to do those things.
Stephen, you used the word moat, which I think is a really important word for entrepreneurs. We have to have a moat. We think a lot about moats, and it's an industrial age. A lot of people don't even know what you mean by moat.
It's just
and
the thing
I often think about this idea of what are the moats that are left.
So to define how I define a moat, you've got a castle, and it's got a small circle of water around it. And once upon a time, that circle of water defended the castle from attack, and you can pull up the drawbridge so nobody can attack you very easily. It's a defense from something. So it's your shield, it's your defense. And once upon a time, as an entrepreneur, I've got a software company in San Francisco called Third Web, and we raised almost $30 million. We have a team of 50 great developers, and much of our moat was, you can't compete with us because you don't have the 50 developers and the $30 million in the bank.
How much of that 30 million went to coding?
The vast majority of it. I mean, what else are we going to do? What else?
This is a good thing. I think moats are a bad thing. Okay, let me make the argument there. So everyone is looking for moats. For example, like one of the more significant moats is network effects.
Yeah.
So you can't compete with Facebook or Twitter because to move people from Facebook or Twitter, it's the collective action problem. You need to move them all at once, because if one of them moves, then it's the network is not valuable. They'll go back. So you have this chicken and egg problem. Let's say that we have a more decentralized way of doing social networks. That will remove the power of Twitter to kind of censor. And I think you're at the other end of censorship, right? And so part of my optimism about humanity is that generally there's self-correction. Democracy is a self-correcting system. Free markets are largely self-correcting systems. There are obvious problems with free markets that we can discuss. But take health. There is obesity epidemic. This period of time when companies, ran loose, kind of making this sugary, salty, fatty kind of snacks, and everyone gorged on them, and everyone got very, unhealthy. And now you have Whole Foods everywhere. Today, people in Silicon Valley, they don't go to bars at all. They go to running clubs. That's how you meet. That's how you go find a date. You go to running clubs. And so there was a shift that happened because there was a reaction. Obviously, cigarettes is another example. You were talking about phones and our addiction to phones. And I see a shift right now. Like in my friend circle, like people who are constantly kind of on their phones is already kind of frowned upon, and they don't want to hang out with you because you're constantly staring on your phone. So there's always these reactions.
But the problem is you reference self-correction. And I agree that there's actually an automatic feature of the universe in which the self-correction happens. You can't have a positive feedback that isn't reined in by some outer negative feedback. But the list of corrections involves things like you point to, where people become enlightened and they realize that they're doing themselves harm with either the sugar that they're consuming or the dopamine traps on their phone, and they get better. But also on the list of corrective patterns are genocide and war and, parasitism. And the problem is these things are destructive of wealth. And so you allude to the superior fact of an open market without moats. Presumably the benefit of that is that more wealth gets created because people aren't kept from doing things that are productive. I see that. But then what is the product of all of this new wealth that is going to be generated by a world empowered by AI? Does it end up so highly concentrated that you have a tiny number of ultra elites and a huge number of people who are utterly dependent on them? What becomes of those people? The learning process, the self-correction process goes through harm in order to get to that more enlightened solution. There's nothing that protects us from the harm phase being so apocalyptically terrible that, we get to the other side of it and we say, well, that was a hell of a correction. Or maybe there's nobody there to even say that. Those are also on the table.
It reminds me of a mousetrap where you see the cheese and we're going, oh my God, my grandmother's going to be able to do some research. And oh my God, my life's going to get easier. So you head closer and closer to the cheese.
And then
historically, if we look at all of the last 10,000 years, it's a very small number of elites who own absolutely everything and a very large number of serfs and peasants who have a subsistence living.
If the elites are too greedy and they freeze out the peasants at too high a level and they try to use brutality
pitchforks.
Eventually it comes back to haunt them. And so what you get is a recognition that you need a system that does balance these things. And, the West has the best system that we've ever seen. It's one in which we agree on a level playing field. We never achieve it, but we agree that it's a desirable thing. And the closer we get to it, the more wealth we create. But again, if AI empowers those with ill intent at a higher rate than it empowers those who are wealth creating and pro-social, we may be in for a massive regression in how fair the market that the West
is that your top concern versus economic displacement? And
I think they're the same thing.
How are they the same thing?
Because the economic displacement is going to start. I don't know how many million people are going to be displaced from their jobs in the US. Suddenly we're going to have a question about whether or not we have obligations to them.
You agree with that, don't you?
Yes, but again, it's the no pain, no gain. I mean, we're going to go through a period of disruption, and I think at the other end, the old, sort of oppressive systems will be broken, and we're going to create perhaps a fair world, but it's going to have its own problems.
And what's the scale of that disruption in your estimation?
It's hard to say because there's this concept of limiting factors. Like, there is regulation. There's the appetite of people to take. For example, the healthcare system is very resistant to innovation because of regulation, and that's a bad thing.
On the regulation point, it's worth saying that when Trump came into power, he signed in a new law, which is called Removing Barriers to American Leadership in AI, which revokes previous AI policies that were deemed to be restrictive. Mm-hmm. And obviously, when you think about where the funding is going in AI, it's going to two places. It's going to America, and it's basically going to China. That's the vast majority of investment. So with those two in competition, any regulation that restricts AI in any way is actually self-sabotage. Mm-hmm. And this is, I live in Europe some of the time. And it's already annoying to me that when Sam Altman and OpenAI released the O3 model, this new incredible model, it's not in Europe because Europe has a regulation which prevents it from coming to Europe. So we're now at a competitive disadvantage, which Sam Altman's spoken about. And more broadly on this point of disruption, I was quite unnerved when I heard that Sam Altman's other startup was called WorldCoin. And WorldCoin was conceived with the goal of facilitating universal basic income, i.e. helping to create a system where people who don't have money are given money by the government just for being alive to help them cover their basic food and housing needs, which suggests to me that the guy that has built the biggest AI company in the world can see something that a lot of us can't see, which is there's
Poison
going to
and the
be
cure.
yeah, there's going to need to be a system to just hand out money to people because they're not going to be able to survive
I
otherwise.
disagree. I fundamentally disagree with that.
Which part do you disagree with?
I disagree that, first of all, that humans would be happy with UBI. I think that, a core value of humans, and be curious about the evolutionary reasons, is we want to be useful.
It's really important to know that a lot of the jobs that are at risk are the most high status, highly paid jobs in the world. Let's take the highest paid job in America, which is an anesthesiologist. This is the highest paid job. And
highest paid salaried job.
Salaried job, yeah. And the majority of that job is observing a patient, knowing which type of medication would work best with their body, giving them the exact right amount, monitoring the impact of that on the body, and then making slight adjustments. The right technology, and any nurse will be able to do that job. And you might have one anesthesiologist on site supervising 10, 20, 30, 40 wards, and the technology is, doing the job, but that one person is there just to kind of supervise if something went wrong or if there was an ethical dilemma.
What's wrong with that? I mean, if the precision is better with AI.
Oh no, there's nothing wrong with that except for the fact that a lot of people, hundreds of thousands of people, have spent their entire life training to be that. They get an enormous amount of purpose and satisfaction about the fact that that's their career, that's their job. They have mortgages, they have houses, they have status, and that's about to go away.
Well, if it's highest paid jobs, maybe you should start saving.
Yeah, well.
Well, I mean, but I hear you. But you're talking about people who have done vital work, highly specialized work, and are therefore not in a great position to pivot based on the invention of a technology that they didn't see coming because, frankly, I mean, in the abstract, maybe we all saw AI coming somewhere down the road, but we did not know that it was going to suddenly dawn. And we do have to figure out what to do with those people. It's not their fault that they've suddenly become obsolete, and it's inconceivable that people will accept this.
Yeah.
It is not. It is fundamentally incompatible with our nature. We have to have things to strive for, and you can sustain life that way, but you cannot sustain a meaningful existence. And so it's a short-term plan at best.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.